So recently I added the Amitabha Buddha practice and reciting J Rinpoche's prayer to be reborn in the land of bliss to my daily practice. And that's been giving me a lot of joy. And it also comes as a surprise because I will say when I first met Buddhism and I was practicing back in Singapore, I actually saw this practice from a kind of a negative bias kind of lens. And that's because I perceived it to be a practice that was done by people who were old, who were not well educated, who were Chinese speaking. And then as someone who was English speaking, well educated, and young, this was not the practice for me, right? These are people who come to the temple and chant and they don't go to class. And I don't think I was the only one with that sort of bias because I do recall our teacher of the Buddhist youth group admonishing us one day saying, maybe you've spent many lifetimes as one of these aunties chanting for a long time to create the causes to come to class. Okay, so you young'uns, don't be so uppity, is really what he was trying to say. So what changed? Yeah, in reflecting on my relationship with the Amitabha practice, I found that the framework of the four authenticities that His Holiness the Dalai Lama and Venerable Children mentioned in approaching the Buddhist path was actually quite helpful in helping me to make sense of my experience. So I thought I'd read that little section from Approaching the Buddhist Path and then share how it relates to my relationship with the Amitabha Buddha practice. So it says in Approaching the Buddhist Path, the Lamdre, or Path and Result teachings of the Sakya tradition, speaks of four authentic factors that help us to have confidence in the Buddha's teachings and develop in the Dharma. So these are the authentic sutras of the Buddha, authentic commentaries, authentic teachers, and authentic experience. In terms of historical evolution, authentic sutras taught by the Buddha came into being first. And based on these many authentic commentaries, treatises written by Nagarjuna and other great sages who explained the final thought of the Buddha were composed. And based upon studying these authentic commentaries, authentic teachers who have realized the themes presented in the authentic commentaries have come into being. And on the basis of the teachings given by authentic teachers, then authentic spiritual realizations or experiences grow in the hearts of practitioners. And then, as he often does in this text, His Holiness then points out how, in our personal experience, it happens in the reverse order. Yeah. And that's what I found to be definitely true for myself. So when I started out as a new Buddhist, I did not grow up in a Buddhist family. I had no interest or faith in rebirth, but it was very much my personal experience of the teachings that started to get me going back to class. Just going to meditation class, hearing about how to apply the teachings helped me to be a bit less reactive. It improved my personal relationships on a day-to-day level because of being less reactive. And most importantly, over time, I found the Dharma really helped me in difficult situations. Dealing with illness, a breakup, unpleasant work environment, and so on. Yeah, so it was more like, when the rubber hits the road, this actually works. What I hear in class, I can apply to my life. And that's what got me going back. And then over time, I developed trust in my teachers. And from myself, my karma has been to have teachers that are all monastics. So in that vein, I trust that they're not trying to get rich and famous. In fact, you have to request them many times to teach. But most importantly, I found that they actually taught what they meditated on and practiced. And when you study with a teacher over a number of years, you can really see what they're like day to day. Or, you also see them respond to all kinds of different kinds of questions and situations. And you see, wow, here's a human being who's really trying to put these teachings into practice. And they've grown over time. Maybe it's possible for me too. And it's really thanks to Venerable Children that we've gotten teachings on incredible commentaries, books and texts I would not have read alone for sure. And it was Nagarjuna's precious garland of advice to a king that really changed my whole relationship to the Mahayana teachings and to the Mahayana sutras as well. Because I will say that before we studied that text, there was always at the back of my mind this thought, because I met the Theravada teachings first, those were the teachers I studied with originally, there was always this thought, I think stream entry is a very difficult goal. It's probably what is possible for someone like me in this lifetime. So to attain this state of stream entry, you have to abandon the three fetters, which are the view of a personal identity, That's pretty hard. Yeah, like, right. And then there's doubt, right? Doubt in the three jewels, the cause and effect, and the view of rules and practices. This view that thinks that bad ethics or modes of conduct are supreme, right? Which could be anything from thinking that jumping on a trident is going to bring awakening, but just the idea that, if I do certain things, it's going to get me ahead when it doesn't. All right, so I thought, that's pretty hard. Yeah, so I thought it's realistic to go for that. But the first time I met the teachings on the Bodhisattva paths and grounds was in chapter 5 of Precious Garland. And it says there that the first ground Bodhisattva not only abandons the three fetters, but also all the acquired forms of all afflictions. So I'm going to read a section from Khenso Jampa Tekchok's commentary on the text, which is published as Practical Ethics and Profound Emptiness. So he says, on the first ground, in one instant, these Arya Bodhisattvas are able to directly see the faces of 100 Buddhas, receive the blessings of those 100 Buddhas, go to 100 Buddha realms, see 100 Buddha fields, vibrate 100 worldly realms, live for 100 eons, see 100 eons into the past and 100 eons into the future, enter into and arise from 100 different concentrations due to their great mental agility, open 100 different doors of doctrine, mature 100 sentient beings, emanate 100 bodies, and surround each of these bodies with a retinue of 100 Arya Bodhisattvas in a single instant. I was like, what? I don't know. When I heard that teaching, it's like, these beings have removed the three lower fetters like the stream enters, but look at what else they can do. It's like, that's what the accumulation of merit for eons is about. It's like, wow, when you have those realizations, you can benefit so many beings. And I think my mind was just ready to hear that. It was no longer in the, sounds like science fiction or whatever. It was like, whoa, super inspired. And that opened my mind and my heart, I would say, to the Mahayana path. And this year I've had the good fortune to work on translating a chapter on Amitabha from the Maharatnakutta Sutra, which is the Sutra of Great Accumulation of Treasures. And that's just been very inspiring. I would not have read that sutra on my own again, right? But through this slow process of personal experience, trusting the teacher, starting to trust the commentaries. When I read this sutra, it was like, oh wow, there are long descriptions of what the bodhisattvas engage in their practice. I was so moved to read about the monk who made those aspirations to become Amitabha, such that he would establish a pure land where anyone who has strong confidence in Amitabha, who practices the three higher trainings, or who recites Amitabha's name with concentration, will create the cause to be reborn there. Yeah. So I was just very moved by this sutra. So it's just been interesting to see how my mind has changed over time. And perhaps also the purpose of this talk is to remind myself, and I'm not sure if it relates to you, but not to let bias or lack of understanding or confusing the Dharma with culture affect our relationship with the practice. Sometimes if you're brand new and you go in, it's like people are ringing bells and there's a lot of food on the table and I don't know what's going on. Like, hold up. Yeah, take time to find out from practitioners what exactly they're doing, what they're thinking, what exactly the teachings are about. And I think as you go to class and study, you'll find that what I love most about the Buddha Dharma is that all the teachers I've met, whatever tradition they're in, are basically teaching the same thing. Yeah, whether it's the Four Truths or the cultivation of love and compassion, the methods to get there might be different, or the emphasis might be different, but I found the teachings interrelate, and that has given me a lot of confidence that 2,600 years after the Buddha has taught the Dharma, it continues to be passed on by authentic practitioners. Yeah. And we can see the result for ourselves in our practice.